Hello, my name is Peter and I'm your host for This Week in X. It's the show where I go over all of the X-Men comics out this week from Marvel Comics to help catch you up to the current day and help you decide, are these the comics that you want to be buying and reading? And this was a big week for X-Men, a lot of titles out this week. We had all new Wolverine, Deadpool versus Old Man Logan, Generation X, Weapon X, and X-Men Gold. So let's dig right in and start with All New Wolverine. All New Wolverine number 29 is written by Tom Taylor. It has line art from Juan Cabal, color art from Nolan Woodward, and letters by Corey Petit. The cover is by Elizabeth Torque. Let's start off with a little bit of a recap of where we are with All New Wolverine. First of all, who is All New Wolverine? That is X-23, Laura Linney. She is a clone of Wolverine, but a female clone, and many of you became familiar with her in 2017 from the film Logan. So at the beginning of All New, All Different, Marvel Now, at the beginning of 2016, she got her own title, and instead of calling her X-23, she began to be called Wolverine because Logan as Wolverine was, at the time, spoilers, dead. So the difference between X-23 as Wolverine and many different characters who took legacy standing as their characters in All New, All Different Marvels, such as Amadeus Cho as Hulk, or Thor, whose identity I won't spoil in case you haven't found out yet, is she didn't really take Wolverine's place in a lot of Wolverine's other functions. She was still kind of just doing her own thing, and it was much more about X-23 trying to live up to Wolverine, both as a clone of him, but also she looks to him sort of as a parental unit. And Tom Taylor has done an extraordinary job, not just an extraordinary job, but an extraordinarily consistent job with her title. We've really seen an arc that she's gone through over the past 28 issues as she's kind of come into herself and also not only learned to be more human, which was an arc that Marjorie Liu took her on in her 2010 X-23 series, but also how to also become a role model and a hero with the introduction of some other characters, including Gabby, who's a clone of X-23, who herself is a clone. This kind of annoyed me at first because, like, how many Wolverines do we need all at once in the universe? But Taylor has a very specific arc for Gabby to be on that's different than X-23's, and I've really come to love her over the course of the series. So at this point, this is the current story arc. X-23 has kind of made peace with Daken, Wolverine's sometimes good, sometimes bad, always bisexual and quite sexually voracious son, and they're kind of in a team-up mode, and they've hit up against this group called the Orphans of X, who are presumably orphans of previous X-Men attacks, although we haven't gotten a lot of specificity around that. And they really want to do away with all of the X-Men, but quite specifically, it seems like they're focused on ones that are derived or related in some way to Wolverine. And so they try to give Laura back someone from her life who she thinks is lost, but it's a fake out. And Daken, I'm not sure. I say Daken, but I've been recently corrected to Daken. Daken kind of exposes this and helps Laura and her family get to safety. So that's where we are in this episode, in this issue, and I have to tell you, I loved it. Let me tell you a little bit why. This art team of Juan Cabal and Nolan Woodward is one of the best art teams I've seen in all of All New, All Different Marvel. Juan Cabal does not have a lot of credits. I don't know if he previously was an artist under some other name, or maybe he's only done international work and that's why I can't find him in my normal comic databases, but he did draw Elektra at the beginning of 2017 with Matthew Rosenberger, I think, as the writer. Could be wrong about that, but he's incredible. He just draws really great, really well-shaped and distinct figures, but the coloring I find even more incredible from Nolan Woodward. He is on this very careful line between things aren't shiny and there's not too much gradients. You don't look at a face and see it like gradienting up to the lighter color. He's doing something that almost is reminiscent of like cell animation, where everything looks very shaded and filled in, and it's a very delicate kind of color work, but he makes things look very fully saturated. So I'm loving the art on this, but I'm also loving the story. And in this issue, it's a little bit lighter weight than the past couple, but I'm still with it because it's a kind of middle late chapter in an arc, and I don't need it to be as revelatory. I'm okay with there being some action. And there's definitely a lot of action. There's, you know, both from X-23, from Gabby, who we now call Honey Badger, and from Daken. And it all looks extraordinary, and it acknowledges a lot of little moments of past Wolverine. I've seen some commenters say, well, it doesn't fully address this Wolverine prior plot. Well, guess what? It's not meant to be an encyclopedia of all former Wolverine plots. It's about X-23's journey, and it does make use, I'm going to look at my screen for a second here, of the Muramasa blade, which is a blade that cuts through and cannot be healed from. And so this is clearly something really dangerous for characters that have regenerative powers. It's been a part of X-23's story before, and now it's part of her story as Wolverine, but we're also seeing a different side of the kind of fusion of ironsmithing and magic that made that blade, that perhaps there could be a version of it that's ultimately protective versus a version of it that's ultimately destructive. I could not more possibly highly recommend this arc of All New Wolverine. The art is incredible, the writing is great, it's funny, it's violent, it's witty, and I absolutely think it is worth picking up if you love Wolverine, if you love X-23, or if you just love X-Men comic books. Next month we'll conclude this arc. I don't know what's going to happen after that, but Tom Taylor will be writing X-Men Red, led by Jean Grey, with X-23 and Gabby on the title. So I don't know what's in store for the future of All New Wolverine, but it has been can't miss for 29 straight issues now, and that is really quite a feat. The next comic book on our list is Deadpool versus Old Man Wolverine #4. The team on this title is writer Declan Shalvey, artist Mike Henderson, colorist Lee Luffridge, letterer Joe Sabino, and the cover is by actually the writer, who's also an artist of note, Shalvey, along with his partner Jordi Belair, who's a fantastic colorist. This series I'm not loving. So look, Deadpool basically has one ongoing title at all times, and then he has a constant stream of miniseries, many of which pit him up against other heroes or kind of team him up in some way. It's like basically a Deadpool team-up book that is just broken up into lots of different miniseries. And I wasn't against it being Deadpool versus Old Man Logan. I learned from Deadpool versus Hawkeye that some of these series can be great. So I really kind of set aside any kind of hesitation I have for that. And ultimately, Deadpool and Old Man Logan have not bumped up against each other that much in All New, All Different, so I thought, hey, that'll be cool. And Declan Shalvey, who's primarily an artist, is starting to make the move to be writer more, and based on the first issue of this, I was kind of into that. He's got that kind of like jokes quality of a Deadpool comic book, but he also put in a lot of action, and I appreciated it. However, as this story has developed, I just don't think it's that noteworthy, and it's a weird thing. With limited series, I kind of feel like they need a reason to exist, and if they just kind of feel like a kind of arc of a book, my question becomes like, why wasn't it just an arc of a book? Was it really worth taking an kind of story and making a limited series of it when that didn't need to exist, but some ongoing book somewhere was meant to keep trucking on? And that's kind of how I'm feeling about this. Deadpool's funny, there's blood and violence, but the character moments like don't really track for me, and some of the decisions don't really track either. So in this particular issue #4, it's kind of like a breakout issue. Like Deadpool and Old Man Logan have found themselves somewhere they don't want to be, and they're with a young mutant who they are trying to protect, that Deadpool actually had no interest in originally, and Old Man Logan was on his way to protect, and Deadpool kind of just inserts himself the way that he does. And there's a couple of uses of powers in this issue that I like don't really get or understand, and there's a really weird moment with Old Man Logan, which seems hugely out of character, but who knows, maybe they'll get recast in the next issue, where he's like, we've made the mistake, there's no reason to bring this young mutant back to the Xavier Academy, like, we should just leave her, which seems hugely out of character, no matter how dangerous or psychopathic some young mutant might be, for Logan to want to leave them behind. Also, I feel like the art, it's pretty solid, but the desaturated nature of some of Luffridge's colors here are not my favorite job from him on covers. He's fantastic. I almost always love him on colors, and this is the not almost. Here's the thing, if you like Deadpool a lot, you probably will still like this, but I just don't think it's in that like upper tier of awesome Deadpool where it's really like clicking constantly, and I don't think it's really worth it if you're a big Old Man Logan fan. I think if you do want to see and support Declan Shalvey as a writer, it's a place to do that. I know he's going to do great stuff going on, but this particular series, I'm kind of just like, maybe the final issue, which I think the next issue is the final one, will resolve that for me, maybe not. Next up this week is Generation X #86. This is one of the series that got the Marvel Legacy renumbering to add the current numbering onto the original numbering of the Generation X series from the 90s. The team on this title is writer Christina Strain, artist Emil Carpina, colorist Felipe Sobrero, letterer Clayton Cowles, and the cover is by Terry Dodson and Rachel Dodson. I loved this comic book. I love this comic book in general, not just this issue. I think this is so uniquely X-Men, and if you're the kind of person who's like, loves the X-Men and are just not getting X-Men from any of the current titles, you need to check out Generation X. Unfortunately, it's already canceled. It's only going to last another couple of issues, but hopefully, you know, a late show of support for this and a show of support for it in trade will make a difference in seeing these characters again and hopefully seeing more of Christina Strain. She gets these voices so, so well. She does the most well-rounded Jubilee I can remember really ever, but she's really doing delightful things with kids that I have no affinity for, right? There's so many kids in this next generation of X-Men that like everybody's got their favorites. These are none of mine, and yet I still love them. So the story so far is that Jubilee has this kind of non-team of non-X-Men. They're X-Men that, they're mutants rather, that probably are not going to be active combatant X-Men, and she's kind of just shepherding them through. Now, we've seen this concept on many occasions before, and there's no reason to think this would be any more remarkable or different. The reason it's a little bit remarkable is because of two of the students that probably could be X-Men and some of the ones that can't. So one is Quentin Quire, who's one of the most powerful students, and he's also been the star of books before, but he's got such bad behavior and he acts so poorly that they kind of have broken him down to this like B squad. And the other one is Bling, who pretty much just is in a diamond form all the time, and she has no chance to turn it off the way that Emmett Frost does. And so she feels like maybe she really could be an X-Men, but that's kind of all she is, you know, and it's not even like Rockslide, who at this point can like shoot his rocks everywhere, or Colossus and Emma, who can turn it on and off. I don't think she's super, super strong either. So she's on the squad, along with some like serious non-combatants too. And this book really just kind of like charts their relationship drama, although they do some like fighting and things, and they kind of go on missions. But it's especially the drama between, it's kind of a weird love triangle, sort of, let's just call it relationship triangle, between Quentin Quire and with this new student, Nathaniel, and then Benjamin Deeds, who is a Brian Bendis creation, who can shapeshift to mimic other people that usually he's nearby, and so that he tends to like double other people, but he's good for like kind of knocking someone out and replacing them. So we've gotten to this point where the background villain for the whole series has been Monet M, who originated in the original Generation X, but she has been merged with her brother Emplet, who is the original villain from the first issue of Generation X back in the 90s, and that happened in Cullen Bunn's Uncanny X-Men run, and it's been a pretty cool development for Monet. I love that like the X-Men writers will not let her go darkly into the night off stage. They're keeping her under the spotlight, and they're making sure she goes through development ever since Peter David brought her back in X Factor, and I love that because I love Monet. Here, she's kind of been on a collision course with the team, and there have been some near misses. She did kind of have an interaction with Bling that went really poorly, and that wasn't for Bling, and that wasn't the first time that had happened either, because Emplet really enjoys feeding on the energy of Bling. So this time Monet brings the fight to the X-Mansion. Now, we've seen a lot over the years, and especially very recently in the X-Books, where like one character comes to the X-Mansion and throws it all into a tizzy, and I'm always like, dude, there's like 50 X-Men living there. Can this one character really do it? In the case of Emplet, though, they really, really can, because Emplet has done this in the past because he can shift things out of dimensional space, which means that they can't really call for help, and you buy that Emplet, and especially merged with M, who is incredibly smart, like picks the moment well when the mansion is most vulnerable. So I totally buy it. And the conflict, it's fun to see some of these students fighting against Emplet, and also some of the non-students like Chamber and Husk. So we've really got a lot of the cast who's still living from Generation X here. But we also get a lot of relationship moments in the middle of that fight, including one really big one from the relationship triangle. The other thing that happens here, though, is Quentin Quire. I have to give so many props to Christina Strain. She's so great! Former colorist. She was the colorist of the original Runaways. She's also a writer in a TV writing room, but she's amazing here. Amazing. She's been amazing in the whole series, and not only is she great at the relationships, not only is she great at the voices, not only is she great in bringing in obscure characters and giving us a tiny update on their lives, but she's just really great at acknowledging what's happening in the other books. So Quentin Quire just made a really significant appearance in Thor, of all places, and in it he has a significant interaction with the Phoenix Force, which is kind of a hot topic right now with Jean Grey coming back, and Strain not only like lets us know this is happening after Thor, it takes into account the events of that, but she like very deftly handles resolves Quentin's relationship with the Phoenix Force and gives us a major fan moment at the end. Now, it's not what I was personally looking for. I was okay with this development not happening, but I know a lot of people have been waiting for it, and it's handled, it could not have been handled better. It's a great moment for Quentin, it's a great moment for the person in the moment effects. If you have not been reading Generation X, now's the time to catch up so that you can appreciate this issue. It's not one that I would jump right in on. The other thing, though, is to talk a little bit about the artist, Amilcar Pino, who's back. He was the original artist of the book, then we had some other artists in between. He has a strange style. It's a little bit of acquired taste, and the way I would describe it is it's like a fisheye lens. Like, everybody looks like we're looking at them with a heavy focus on the front of their faces, and they kind of recede back from it a little bit. So everybody's very like nosy, and they all kind of have this look to them a little bit. And I don't say that to make fun. I love the style. I think it's really like youthful and kinetic for this kind of cast, and it's not the kind of thing that I would want to see in like X-Men Gold or Blue, but he handles the action here really, really well. So look, you might look at the first issue of Generation X that came out in 2017 and be like, whoa, that's not for me, and it hasn't fundamentally changed. I think he's refined his style a little bit. It's a little bit tighter, a little bit cleaner, but if the art really, really wasn't for you at the beginning, it's probably still not for you. But this book, for me, it hit all of the buttons for me, and I loved it, and I'm so excited to see what Christina Strain is going to be doing at Marvel after Generation X, but first we got a couple more issues, and I'm happy for that as well. The next book on our list is Weapon X number 13. The team behind this title is writer Greg Pak, artist Yuladre Sinar, colorist Frank D'Armata, letters from Joe Caramagna, and the cover is by David Nakayama. I am not loving this comic book too much, but let me give you the background and maybe you'll understand both my love and lack of love, and if you would love it too. So, Weapon X typically refers to the program that created Wolverine and was an outgrowth, really, of the original Super Soldier program. And this book represents sort of a rekindling of that program, but really a perversion of that program to create a new style of fabricated soldier. And the book begins not with a team, but with this new program trying to kidnap specific mutants that they want to fuel their new creations with their DNA. So Wolverine, Sabretooth, Lady Deathstrike, who all have relatively similar regenerative abilities. And then also Domino, who has luck abilities, and Warpath, who also has strength in addition to his regenerative abilities. And so Greg Pak winds up doing something really interesting, which is it's not a team book. It's a book that happens to be about a group of characters with a very specific mission and enemy, and that's what it is. There's no need for filler issues. There's no need to change focus. It's about that. And the way that he actually made it about that is he crossed over with his other title, Totally Awesome Hulk, because it turned out that these people were also trying to get a Hulk sample, because what could be scarier than like a army of, you know, cybernetically enhanced Wolverines, an army of cybernetically enhanced Wolverine Hulks. The thing is, the story's actually pretty interesting, but I just feel like it's not making great use of the characters. Like, they're kind of just going from like point A to point B to point C, very doggedly pursuing the, you know, results of this company's work, but I don't feel like it has a ton of really great character moments, and it like can't decide how to treat some of the characters. And I think this issue is a great example of that with Domino. So Domino, we've seen her in these mercenary forces before. She was in 2008's X-Force, and she is willing to be a part of these sort of things, and she's not somebody who's just in it for herself all the time. She's a lot of times in it for the fun of being in it. But in this series, pretty much every Domino line is like about like, can we get some money now? I want to find some money. Where's the bank? Let's go steal some stuff. And it feels like a really reductive version of Domino that like doesn't quite work for me. She's just a little bit more than that. And same for Lady Deathstrike. Like, we've seen her recently as a villain in X-Men 2013. We've seen her as a villain pretty recently in Old Man Logan, and then he tries to team up with her and it kind of goes horribly wrong for him. But here she kind of is just like tagging along as the silent partner in the back of the room. And then Sabretooth, who most recently was in Cullen Bunn's Uncanny X-Men, who kind of is like feeling the results of his Axis flip from the Axis event that kind of turned him good wear down a little bit, and he's kind of like confronting his worst nature. They're all just kind of one note, and this issue especially has them all being kind of one note, and it does bring back an interesting character that is a great Marvel legacy tie, and it ties into the history of the Weapon X project, but it's starting to just feel like a little onerous. The art is pretty solid, has pretty good action. I think if you're somebody who likes these like bloodied, clawed teams, it's fine, but it's not Uncanny X-Force is not X-Force. It doesn't quite have the zip behind it that those titles do, which is strange for me because I almost always love Greg Pak. I think the art has evened out a little. We've seen a number of artist changes on this for a title that's only on issue 13. And I think, you know, Yildiray Cinar is somebody who can deliver pretty on-model, pretty kinetic characters, and they do look pretty good here. So if you did want to pick this title up, I don't necessarily know that you need to go back for like the whole first 12 issues, including the crossover with Totally Awesome Hulk, which like pads it out to being like 16 or 17 issues once you take the one shot and the crossover. I think you could probably just start at the beginning of this arc and kind of learn all that you want to learn, which I believe was just in the previous issue. So if you do want to pick it up, I think that that's fine. I think Old Man Logan is a little bit better in his own title right now. Domino's got her own series coming out in a few months, written by Gail Simone, so that's going to be great. So it's really only if you like need your like Clawed Mutants fix, or if you like really, really miss Sabretooth or Warpath, and I don't feel like Warpath is super great. Now, the one interesting thing this arc is doing is playing with the idea of like, how much should mutants get involved in the political stability of a nation, right? We've seen this go really south in the past with Genosha, and should they here? Because they go somewhere just because mutants are at risk in that place, and they try to remove the imminent risk, but the mutants are saying it's not just an imminent risk. We're going to continue to be hunted. It's part of this whole government, and it's part of the US's intervention with this government. So, I mean, it's a great question that parallels the real world, right? Like, what happens when the US's intervention goes too far in some country, like, and then you pull it away? Those people wind up suffering, but you can't just install yourself there forever. And the team is kind of experiencing that. And you have Old Man Logan, who's like old enough to know better, Sabretooth, who mostly just wants to kill people, Domino, who mostly just wants money, Lady Deathstrike, who knows what she knows, and like basically Warpath, who's the only one who's like strong on the pro side, being like, we cannot let these indigenous people be, and these at-risk mutants be slaughtered. So that's actually an interesting moment for Warpath, and it's nice to see him act authentically there instead of just being like, oh, blood, stabby, stab, stab. So kind of a little bit in the middle on this one. I think if you, like I said, if you like certain characters of these, or if you like this kind of X-Men book, it could be the book for you, but not my top recommendation for somebody who's just looking for some great X-Men at this moment in time. And the last X-Men title on our list this week is X-Men Gold number 20. The team behind this comic book is writer Mark Guggenheim, penciler Diego Bernard, inker J.P. Meyer, colorist Frank Martin, letters from Corey Petit, and the cover is by Ken Lashley and Federico Blee. This is kind of like the primary X-Men title. I know that X-Men Gold and Blue are kind of co-flagships, but this is the one that's following the actual crux of X-Men rather than the time-displaced team in X-Men Blue. So Kitty Pryde takes over the X-Men Academy from Storm, who's kind of just totally worn out, and Kitty Pryde starts kind of chairing the away team for the Institute, and the team primarily consists of usually her, Colossus, Storm, Old Man Logan for reasons that I do not understand, and usually Rachel Gray, but she's been benched here, and Nightcrawler as well, so other people come and go. So we've seen a number of things happen to this team. They're very involved in New York and trying to like be heroes in the city again, but one of the first things that happens to them is they fight the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, and they're all mutants with the exception of this one strange kind of alien creature who doesn't speak English. So the team winds up keeping him captive in the X-Men mansion, and he eventually picks up English, gets out, and is rescued by his people who are from the Negative Zone, and the X-Men give chase, and they get stuck on a planet in the Negative Zone. So that's what this whole arc has been. This technically is the conclusion to that Negative Zone war arc, which is a total misnomer. There's really not, I mean, it is a war in the Negative Zone, but it's like not a Negative Zone war, the Negative Zone war, surely not. And, but this is kind of just a one-shot that wraps that up and gets them back to New York, so you don't really have to have read anything leading up to it at all. It really doesn't matter if you read the arc that came before this. So if you wanted to jump into X-Men Gold, you might as well just pick up this issue. What the issue is it's what I think of, or sometimes call, a bottle issue, where it just, everything is self-contained and it's just an experience for these characters, but it's not a very interesting experience. Basically, they've crash-landed on this kind of like deserty planet, and they've all been divided and they need to get back together. And that's a great thing to do in an issue. Chris Claremont has done this to great effect with single issues in the past. But the thing is, none of the challenges here seem particularly interesting. We're not really learning anything about any of the characters. There's nothing noteworthy. It's not even like an emotional story. It's kind of like, here's the setup for the 4 different places where they're stuck, and now they're not stuck. It's very, very procedural, and that really has been an element of X-Men Gold all along. strong. Like, it's got the characters we love. They sometimes are really acknowledging their history. It's clear that Mark Guggenheim really is a student of X-Men history, but then the things that they're doing on the page don't, like, they just feel like trend lines of the past history. Like, Storm, based on her history, may react this way, but it doesn't, like, feel like Storm, and it doesn't tell us anything about Storm. So in this issue, Storm fights a big thing. Colossus is hurt and in the desert. And then it ends. So no, I absolutely don't recommend X-Men Gold. I don't recommend a single issue of X-Men Gold, except for maybe the Mojoverse crossover that started with issue 13 with X-Men Blue, because that was really interesting. I think this is a title that is struggling to understand what it means to be X-Men and write X-Men and understand why these characters are interesting, and I think it's hard for us to be on issue 20 and still be struggling. Like, I don't want to say anything's bad, right? Like, I'm not here to do that. There's probably some people who really like this comic, but if I'm trying to bring X-Men fans back into the fold, it's not with this comic. You know, Guggenheim has said that he's already plotted out like over a dozen more issues. Clearly, based on this, there's a big relationship change coming with issue 30 that Marvel's already starting to promote, because with this being 2 issues a month, it's only 5 months away from now. And I really hope it gets good by then. I hope it gets compelling. I hope it starts feeling like we're really learning something and spending time with these characters. Right now, it doesn't really for me. So this is a thumbs down. Look, except for if you're like desperate to get in on reading X-Men Gold, which I do not recommend, you can pick it up with this issue and keep going. And actually having this issue as a little springboard might help you get into the next issue, so I don't think it's a bad thing to pick this one up if you really do want to be getting into reading X-Men Gold, presumably the flagship of the X-Men franchise. That is it for X-Men titles this week. Next week we have a first issue of a brand new Legion limited series. We have issue 4 of Matthew Rosenberg's Phoenix Resurrection as we build towards the climax and the return of Jean Grey. And we have 2 issues of X-Men Blue, the climax of the current plot, which I'm actually pretty interested in because of where it left off last week, and also an annual that begins their crossover with Venom. But I want to tell you, next week and further episodes past that are not a sure thing. This is a pilot for doing something new on this channel, and it's only something I'm going to keep doing if people really want it. So if this was useful for you, if you agree, if you disagree, if you think it could be useful but I should be doing it a totally different way, I need you to comment below. I need you to like and even dislike if you feel that way the video, and subscribe to the channel to show your support, because that is how I know that it is worth it for me to be bringing this into your computer screens and homes as well. So thank you so much for watching This Week in X. I'm your host Peter, and this is a new feature of Crushing Comics. Thank you so much.